Hi, this is Mayank and I welcome you all to Srijan Wednesday webinars. For those who are attending for the first time, this is a community initiative by Srijan Technologies. As a part of this initiative, we host webinars every alternate Wednesday. We get speakers from different domains who talk about subjects like front-end technologies, UI UX, mobile apps, media, entrepreneurship, digital marketing, and many more. Today's webinar titled How to Build Your One-Man UX Army is focused on helping organizations understand how to set up a user experience team. UX has gained a lot of attention in the recent times because of its importance in product growth and development. With so much buzz around UI, UX, and usability, questions like what should your team comprise of? Is it necessary to get a full force of researchers, information architects, interaction and visual designers? Or can you do it all with a one-man army? These questions still remain unanswered. In this webinar, a speaker will address these questions and share how to set the ball rolling with a one-man UX team. He will also touch upon qualities and responsibilities of a UX person and how you can facilitate a good user experience culture within the organization. I would now like to introduce a speaker for today's webinar. We have with us Yogesh Bhagchandani. Yogesh is an award-winning creative professional with an overall experience of about 14 years in design. He specializes in usability, information architecture, and user interface design. He currently works with Pepstone Infotech as a UX architect where he is nurturing the teams for its two homegrown products, Zalp and Imli. So without taking up any more time, let's get started. Yogesh, over to you.
Thanks Mayank for the introduction, and thank you Priyanka for giving me this opportunity to present today. So welcome you all to this session where I share my learnings and experience on building a one-man UX army. So let me run you through what I shall be covering in this session today. We'll look at qualities and responsibilities of a UX person, what you should expect from your UXer, how can you facilitate UX culture within your organization, how to make everybody think user experience, and finally how to set the ball rolling. So let us start by looking at what kind of a person you need to get on board. So basically the qualities and responsibilities of a user experience person. So if you're going to look for someone who's going to do all this for you, that is UI, UX, HTML, CSS and all that, then this is one of the biggest mistake you are doing. So, and if this is your understanding of UX, then you're completely wrong. You should change your requirements immediately. So when you try to club a UX person with all these technologies, HTML, CSS and stuff, you might get a better deal, a cheaper deal, but then ultimately your product is going to suffer. So this person will have just too many things to juggle. So it's not a good idea to hire someone with so many skills actually, or if you are looking for someone like this, you shouldn't do that. So when you are looking out for a person, whom should you actually look at? So you should hire somebody who has been an entrepreneur, who has dreamt of success, basically someone who can understand your vision. So people who are good at multitasking, people who have done freelance jobs or part-time jobs, basically managed multiple jobs together, so they can make a good user experience person. People who have made shifts in their career from advertising to UX or marketing and design, to user experience. They'll make a good UX person. And the best thing is, we all know, catch them young. So it's easier to mold when they are relatively, in the early stage of their careers. So these are some of the qualities that you should look for when you are hiring a UX professional. So like I mentioned earlier, it has to be someone who will understand your vision. So when you just started thinking of the idea, or you started to share it with people, so that's the time you should get someone on board. So involve your designer at that time. The earlier he comes to the table, the better your product is going to be. So do that even before you hire your developer. Many do this mistake of doing the coding part first and then trying to insert a layer of design in it. But that's not the way you should go about it. Design is not a step in the process or a layer that you can insert. Design is a process in itself. So what is this UX guy supposed to do? He is the one who will help you build a product that is going to be useful and usable. So it's not about technology or a basic layout that your developer will be able to pull off. UX professionals conduct interviews and do research with users. So understanding their behavior, their needs, or the problems they are currently facing. So this is in context to the product that you are designing. Your product ultimately has to solve problems for the users, and hence it's important to understand your users better. So as UX professionals get involved with the user, they also create initial layouts, test or validate them with users. And further, as you advance in the product, so when you are ready to show it to somebody, you conduct usability tests and try to find out if real users are facing problems navigating into the product or reaching their goals. So from say like point A to point C, are they able to traverse properly? So it's funny, but it's so true that UX professionals are people who get paid for advocating somebody outside the organization, that is users. So UX guys are supposed to listen to users and not to the CEOs or the product managers. So having said all this, how do you actually facilitate the UX culture within your organization? So you need to empower your UX, so provide all the research that you have done, so be it primary, secondary, any kind of surveys or validations that you have done. Give everything to the UX guy, and if you have not done it, or you're going by your gut feel, then you are in the danger zone. So you should get this started immediately. And this is what your UX guy should do for you. Involve him from here. So he's going to basically conduct interviews, talk to users, and understand more from them, understand about them. So I hope that this myth about UI UX and a single person doing everything is getting slightly clearer now. So if you have made up your mind and you are serious about improving the user experience of your product, you should actually allocate a budget budget for an agency for getting users initially. So based on the personas that you provide them, they can get you users whom you can talk to and understand more about their behavior. So when users come to your office, you also need to incentivize those users, probably a small gift or something. But it is important that you or your user experience person meets those people. And this again is not a one-time process which you do and you're done with. So you have to keep doing this to get fresh feedback or fresh inputs, maybe from different users. So this again will depend on products or what you are trying to understand or test with these users. But make sure you get feedback on what you are developing. So, and that should be from real users or close to real users. It shouldn't be from your friends or families, because they're only going to please you. They're not going to criticize you. So when you start thinking of your product, you want it to be unique. You want to be innovative when it comes to your own product. Yes, indeed you should. But you should also assess if it is really needed, or what is the cost involved in that kind of innovation. I would say it's absolutely okay to copy. So when I say copy, you copy patterns or success stories. Like Pinterest, it was the first one to introduce the cards interface, and now almost every other site that you see does have the card interface, and it's nothing wrong if they have it. For example, again, the Facebook like or the name tagging in comments. So when Facebook did it, even others copied it. Like for example, LinkedIn did the same thing. So LinkedIn also has a like, it also has a name tagging, and exactly in the similar fashion that Facebook implemented. Another reason that you shouldn't reinvent or innovate in that sense is that it could take time for your users to learn your new way of doing things. So this new innovation could also lead to adoption problems. If things are difficult to manage or execute, users are not going to easily adopt the product. So it's very easy to get excited by what you see on Dribble or Behance, but don't get carried away. You have no background of what went into creating it, so you do not even know who created it or how much time it took, and even what you see over there, was it released or was it published? You don't know. For all you know, it might just be an idea or a concept. So as a CEO, you should not compare between what you see on Dribble and what you get from your user experience designer. It's very unfair to do that comparison. When you hire people from advertising or pure graphic design background, they get into the trap of doing pixel perfect layouts. They tend to tune it to a very high degree of perfection, which is not really needed. Do not worry about things that are broken or things that are half baked. It's absolutely okay if a certain font doesn't show up, or the alignment is not proper. Only you know that. Your users don't know about it. For them, that's the way it is. And if you try to chase too much of how it looks, you will tend to lose focus on what it should do. So do not ever chase gorgeousness in UI. So don't think of uh, ever doing a big bang launch or a release. Nobody's really thinking of your product or is waiting for it actually. So what is actually important to you might not be important to your users. And if you want to launch it in a small way. So give it to a small set of users. Try to create your own micro universe and let them use it. You'll always have time to improvise. So basically design has to evolve and it's not something that can be done in a day. So let's look at LinkedIn. It didn't look very amazing when it was launched, but look at what they are today. They certainly evolved. The UX guy that you hire is actually also your product manager. He's the guardian or the custodian of the product. So when someone is on it, you should be concerned about everything. So be it layout, content, grammar, punctuation, almost all behavior of the product. So even when you as a designer, you're writing UI copy, so never use lorem ipsum. So use something that you want to communicate. Later on, you could get in someone who could fine tune it, refine it, but at first you should be able to communicate. You should be able to express what you want the UI to say. We all want to realize our dreams faster, and you too could get excited to see the final output. It's very tempting for designers to start with Photoshop, but I would say unless you have a blueprint, you cannot start constructing. So you cannot completely ban Photoshop, but at least try to keep them away for some time. Now, introduce the concept of working with pen and paper. It works best. So sketch before you start. Use bigger canvas, big paper, or whiteboards. So when you sketch, it clears a lot of ambiguity. So when sketches are reviewed, when you have your team of developers, marketeers, and the product managers together, and you're reviewing the sketches, your designer might not have all the answers, but then that is what makes people think. So when you ask question, it leads to a lot of things that one person could not think of. For example, let's look at this sketch from Twitter. It's a very basic sketch that they did when they were starting out, and so look at the way the bigger products also get into this exercise where it gives a clarity about what the designer is thinking. If you're going to take away something like Photoshop, you also need to provide an alternative. So provide them with lots of space to sketch and draw. So provide them with whiteboards, they work best. The point I'm trying to drive here is that everybody should participate. It's a lot easier to do it on a whiteboard. It makes a huge difference. Whiteboards can make people get up from their seats and start participating. So get things that people will use, like sticky notes or whiteboards or any other material that encourages collaborative design or participative design. Designers might think that this entire process of interviewing people, understanding them, and sketching, validating, all this is a long process, but you need to help them clear their minds. So do that by creating smaller deadlines and help them work towards it. So if you are if you're planning a release or something, you should announce the date publicly. So for example, like movie releases, they are announced well in advance. So even when the post-production work is going on, the dates are announced, and no matter what, movies do get released on time. So how does that happen? So once you announce it, then no matter what, people who are passionate will make it happen. Another very important thing that you as a CEO or a product manager should do is control the designer in you. So we all have thoughts of how things could be different or how things could be done in a particular way. But my suggestion is, do not guide or do not suggest designers about how to do things. Do not sketch for them. Let them focus on their work while you focus on your work. So I'll give you an interesting example of from my past when my CEO had gone for a client meeting and the client requested for a change in design, a particular aspect of that layout, to which my CEO responded saying, yes, we can do it, but I'll have to go back and check with my designer. And I was a very junior person at that point of time. So that's the kind of belief you should have in your designer. So in the initial stages when you're doing your product, you should also involve your user experience person in everything that you are doing around the product. So any kind of promotion or website or emailer, brochure, etc. that you are doing, involve the designer. It might happen that he knows the product well, he knows the product better than you do, and it's absolutely okay. So involve them in creating all the material around the product as well. So how do you actually make your entire team think about user experience or think on those lines? Especially if you do not have a large team, you should make friends with people from outside. So you could host meetups or co-creation workshops, conduct hackathons, invite your designers, friends, and try to solve problems together. And I also believe that you should allow them to freelance. It opens their minds to a newer thinking. Inspiration can come from anywhere, and you have to ensure that the entire place is extremely creative. So get books, lots and lots of them, or get things that can boost creativity, like the Ogilvy or the Google offices and many other offices actually have a slide to come down from a upper floor. So like if you want to come down from fourth floor to the third floor, you can actually slide in and come down. So basically you need playfulness as work. So if you're thinking of creating innovative products, you also need to create the atmosphere to think creatively. Like Steve Jobs said, design is not just what it looks like and feels like. design is how it works, and I feel that's very true. Everyone who contributes to the success of the product or your website or whatever you are doing, anybody who contributes is a designer. So for example, if a developer is thinking about coding, architecture, server, bandwidth, scalability, he's actually designing the system, and all this contributes to a better user experience. So if you come to think of it, you actually do not have a small UX team if everybody in your team starts thinking about users. Another thing that you should do is try to get the core team in one small room. Best is about 4 to 6 people. If that is not possible, then at least try to dedicate a few hours or days in a week when your designers will be spending time with developers. And when I say spending time, I mean discussing new ideas or new ways of doing things and not solve earlier problems. When Facebook was working on the graph search, so what they did was they got the entire team in a small room and worked for 34 days together. The entire team was disconnected from everything and everybody else at Facebook, and that is how they made it happen. So when you're together, it's a lot easy to sketch and share and discuss rather than sketch and scan, email, and then wait for the response. So try to avoid remote teams when you're doing your product. So especially your UX guy should always be together with the entire team. So I'll quickly sum up what we gathered today. Starting with hiring, I mentioned that you should hire wisely and early. So do not try to get that mix of UI, UX, HTML, JavaScript, and all those technologies and stuff. And get them when you are thinking about the product, when you are validating ideas. Second thing that you should be doing is empower them with the research that you have done, the primary or the secondary research, or if you have not done, then insist on getting the research done and talking to users about their behaviors or what problems they are facing right now. Another thing that you will have to do is allocate a budget for UX, for getting agencies and for incentivizing users. Do not reinvent. That reduces the learning curve. Do not do something that you think is innovative. Rather, do something that has already been tested out there. So let your design evolve. Do not plan a huge launch or something. So it's okay to, if your design looks very basic and you have to give it out to a very few number of people, that's absolutely fine. Facilitate your team with lots and lots of space to sketch and draw. Anything that can encourage participation, do that. When you get your UX guy on board, initially you can involve him to do a lot of other stuff like websites, emailers, sales pitches, and all those things. Give them the freedom to co-create or team up with anybody who is interested in solving problems. So if you do not have a big team, then this works best. Create the atmosphere so so that people can think creatively. Like I mentioned earlier, get books, put up posters, or get toys, or any kind of material that can boost creativity. And last but not the least, encourage everybody to be customer focused. So no matter who that person is in the team, he should think of users when he is working on anything in his area of work. So this brings us to the end of my session. I will now pass it on to Mayank to conduct the Q&A round. Even after the Q&A, in case there is anything that I have not covered or you have queries on, you can always tweet to @pixelfiesta and I'll respond. Thank you.
That was a great session. Thank you, Yogesh, for sharing these insights into UX and how to go about building an awesome UX team. Moving on, I'm sure you all have a few questions. Please press the raise hand button on the control panel to ask these questions using your microphone or type them in the chat box on your screen. So Yogesh, we have a first question by Praveen Verma, who says that he wants to know about a persona. What is a persona? How do you build a persona and how accurate are these?
Personas are basically your fictitious characters that you create out of the research that you do. So when you are talking to your users, when you're doing your basic research, and so you have to talk to people who your target audiences are, and then cull out things that fit into your product, and you create a typical user for your product. So at times there will be different user groups that you will be creating. So as an example, there would be a user, there would be a power user, or anything of that sort, or there could be different roles for the users. So you need to create those personas when you are working on a product.
We hope it answers your question, Praveen. There's another question by him questioning a real user's feedback, where he says, isn't real user's feedback biased in a country like India where every other deal is 40 plus 35% off?
I didn't get the second part of the question. Maybe it's not in context, but I'll try to answer the first part. Yes, it is difficult, and it's not right to just go by user feedback if your sample size is too small. So if you're talking to users like just 3 people or something, then it's not the right way to do it. Talk to at least 10 to 15 people, and again, it will all depend on what your user base is, what your market is, and all those things. So, but yeah, so not everybody will give you genuine or real feedback. So it's partly feedback what you get from real users, and then of course you have to use your gut feel to some extent.
Thank you, Yogesh. We have a question by Amit, who wants to know what is an issue with a single person working on a lot of technologies. There was some slide in which you mentioned that one person ideally should not get into HTML, CSS, and then JS again, a few other things, graphic designing. So what are the issues with if one person wants to do it, and if you could briefly explain the reason?
Yeah, so there is no problem as such in one person handling too many things or too many technologies, but it's just that user experience professionals are a different lot altogether. So it's actually not connected to technology at all if you look at it, and it's actually not connected to design as well. So UX person is typically supposed to do a lot of research on users, building personas, talking to them, understanding their problems, conducting usability tests, and then giving inputs on improvising the product. So, and I believe this is a full-time work for a person, so that doesn't leave any room for this person to do HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and this is not even remotely connected to UX. And second thing is, if a person is going to start researching, talking to users, building personas, doing his sketches, doing his design, then converting them into HTML, applying JavaScript and all those stuff, so it's going to be really complex. So instead, get a person who is specialized in this, and even if he knows stuff, try to keep him away from the regular HTML and all. That's not what they are supposed to do.
Unmuted.
Thank you, Yogesh, for answering that. Akash needs advice on transitioning from a UI developer to a UX developer.
UI developer to a
UX developer.
So Akash, this term UX developer is actually very incorrect. So there is nothing like a UX developers. Although you might find some references or something about UX developers existing, but frankly speaking, there is nothing like a UX.
Muted.
It's only UX or UX designer. There's nothing in development that goes in with user experience. So if I have to amend that question a bit so that it fits in well, so you can make a transition from a UI developer,
Unmuted.
UX developer,
Muted.
UX designer, but then that will require a different mindset altogether. So like I was talking about it earlier, you'll have to shed your HTML, CSS, and if that is what you think is UX, then you are wrong. So UX is a different ball game altogether, and if you are ready to put in that kind of grit to do research and implement your findings, then you can probably think of switching.
Unmuted.
I tried to answer that, and I hope I did that for you, Akash.
Akash, in case you have a follow-up question, please feel free to type it in. In the meanwhile, Abdul wants to know how to ask a mature 17,000 people company to hire a lead designer. It means, yeah, exactly.
How to convince, sorry, can you repeat?
Sure. So the question goes like, how to ask a mature 17,000 person strong company to hire a lead designer? How to convince them, or in general, how to hire a lead designer? What qualities do you look for, if you would answer it that?
I am assuming now this an organization of 17,000 people that you are mentioning does not have a single designer, and everything is now done by developers themselves. So how to convince, that will be a difficult thing to answer, but if so far they haven't done it, then it's high time they do it, because you cannot actually sustain for a very long time with a good user experience. And talking about qualities, like I mentioned earlier, you should actually have somebody who can get into the shoes of the user himself, who understands, so while he's using the product, he should be able to figure out the problems, the frustrations that a person will go through when he is using the system or the product. And yeah, the background, like I mentioned, there should be people who have already tried their hands on creating products, or people who have made shifts in their career. People come from advertising or marketing, or yeah, even from design. So people shift from print to user experience design.
Thank you
I
for
hope I tried to cover that as well.
Sure. Thank you for answering that, Yogesh. Anand wants to know, are there any reference or books to follow to know more about UX with examples?
There are actually a lot of books available. There are, so one thing that you can refer to is the inmates are running the asylum. Then there is a book called Don't Make Me Think, and not necessarily about UX books, but there is an interesting book on creativity which you can refer to. It's called The Art of Looking Sideways, and then there would be many actually. So if you just look up on the web for books on popular user experience, you will get many. And if you write to me, then probably I can share the whole list of all the books.
Thank you, Yogesh. So Dheeraj wants to know that in terms of a dedicated time allocation for user research, how much time are we talking about?
This is a very difficult question to answer, but it will all depend on your product or the budget that you are allocating in terms of time and resources. So it really varies. So for example, like if you were to do a mobile app, which is not a very huge app, then probably you could research with about 15 to 20 users progressively, and for about say the initial phase can be about say like 20 days or something. But then this is not it's not like a magic formula or something that this should be applied to every product. It really depends on case to case and in what depth you want to go to when it comes to research, because when you start doing research you will understand that what you were thinking is totally different than what users actually are thinking. So it can happen that you get too involved into research, and so it can be a never-ending thing. So it's up to you to what extent you want to do research, when to stop, and how to take it forward from them. But then again, you need to do it from time to time. So it's not like once you do it and then you are done. So things can change.
Thank you for answering this and other questions, Yogesh. So we have more questions coming in, but we would need to take them offline because of the restricted time.
Okay. So I would request people to tweet at my handle @pixelfiesta, or you can even write to me at pixelfiesta@gmail.com, and I'll try to answer each of them.
Sure. So we would also request people who still have questions to please mail them at our email ID, webinars@srijan.in. Yogesh would be happy to take them up later on. So thank you once again, Yogesh, for such a knowledgeable session. We are very sure everyone found your presentation very interesting and insightful. A big thank you to all the attendees for joining us in today's webinar, and for all the patience which you guys kept it together because of the technical issues. Thank you so much for that as well. I would also like to announce that the next webinar is on the importance of growth on the 4th of February by Rahul Diwan. Rahul is the founder and CEO of Srijan Technologies. He's a Drupal and open source evangelist, has a keen interest in incubating social and for-profit tech businesses, and expresses his political and religious views rather unabashedly on Twitter. In this webinar, Rahul will explain how the only way to lead a fulfilling, enriching life is to be steadfast about your own personal growth. We'll be sending you the registration link and more details in a subsequent mail, so stay tuned.